emotional about the hounding of the press and the paparazzi and how they were making her life miserable. So I think I did my job.
For more than 2 decades, Matt Lauer was the undisputed king of American morning television. His face greeted millions of households every single day. His voice was the first one many Americans heard as they sat down with their coffee, got their children ready for school, or watched the news unfold in real time. He was charming, authoritative, and seemingly unshakable. NBC's Today Show, under his stewardship as co-anchor, became not just a ratings juggernaut, but a cultural institution. At his peak, Lauer earned approximately $25 million per year, a staggering figure that reflected just how central he had become to one of America's most watched morning programs. He interviewed presidents, sat across from world leaders, covered tragedies, celebrated triumphs, and made it all look effortless. Then, in November 2017, everything collapsed in less than 24 hours. The story of Matt Lauer is not simply a tale of a man brought down by scandal. It is a deeper, more complicated narrative about power, privilege, workplace culture, and what happens when someone who seems untouchable is finally held accountable. It is also the story of a life rebuilt in silence, far from the cameras, far from the applause, and far from the version of himself the world thought it knew. This is what really happened to Matt Lauer, and what his life looks like today. Matthew Todd Lauer was born on December 30th, 1957, in New York City. His family background was a blend of contrasting worlds. His father, J. Robert Lauer, was a bicycle company executive with Romanian Jewish heritage, a man shaped by work ethic, practicality, and the immigrant drive to build something lasting. His mother, Marilyn Comer, was a former model who ran her own boutique. From his father, Lauer inherited discipline and ambition. From his mother, he absorbed an understanding of presentation, aesthetics, and how image shapes perception. Growing up in the suburbs of New York, young Matt was influenced early by his grandfather, Art Gentry, who had been a professional singer during the golden age of American popular music. Watching his grandfather command an audience, holding a room's attention with nothing more than his voice and presence, left a deep impression on the boy. Long before he ever stepped in front of a television camera, Matt Lauer was studying what it meant to connect with people. He learned poise. He learned how to read a room. He learned that communication was not just about information, but about trust and relatability. In the late 1970s, Lauer enrolled at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, where he majored in communications. He was on track for a conventional academic path, but in 1979, just 4 credits shy of earning his degree, he made an impulsive and defining decision. He dropped out. He did not wait for a diploma. He wanted to work. He wanted to be in the field. That restlessness would define him for the next 4 decades, always moving, always pushing forward, rarely pausing to look back. Lauer's entry into television was unglamorous but formative. His first job was as a production assistant and news producer at a local station in Huntington, West Virginia. He was barely in his early 20s, working long hours in a small market, learning the mechanics of broadcast journalism from the ground up. But he had natural ability, and the cameras liked him. Within a year, he had moved from behind the scenes to in front of the lens, landing an on-air reporting role, and eventually his own segment. Throughout the early 1980s, Lauer co-hosted PM Magazine, a nationally syndicated lifestyle and local interest program, in multiple cities. He worked editions of the show in Richmond, Virginia, Providence, Rhode Island, and eventually New York City. Each move was a step up. Each market was bigger, more competitive, more demanding. PM Magazine required a host who could be warm and engaging while also staying sharp and credible. Lauer mastered it. He adapted his tone for each city's audience without losing the thread of his own personality. By the time he reached New York, he had been seasoned in ways that formal education could never have provided. In 1986, he got his first taste of national exposure when ABC launched Fame, Fortune, and Romance, a celebrity-driven spin-off of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Lauer co-hosted the show alongside Robin Leach, whose booming voice and theatrical narration had become a pop culture fixture. The program was glossy and indulgent, a tour through the lifestyles of the world's wealthiest people. It didn't last long, less than a season, but it introduced Lauer to a national audience and signaled something important. He could hold his own in any format. By the late 1980s, Lauer was doing something almost no one else in local television could manage. He was working in multiple cities simultaneously. Between 1987 and 1989, he juggled hosting assignments in Philadelphia and Boston while also contributing segments to ESPN and HBO. He covered major sporting events and entertainment stories, fly between cities, surviving on minimal sleep, and building a reputation as someone relentlessly reliable. People in the industry took note. He wasn't flashy, but he was everywhere, and everywhere he went, he delivered. Lauer's break at NBC came in stages. In the early 1990s, after a rocky stint hosting a live daytime program in New York that clashed with his values, the show was drifting toward sensationalism, and Lauer reportedly refused to participate in some of its more exploitive content. He found himself nearly broke. By 1992, he was close to financial crisis, with no full-time television job and dwindling savings. WNBC in New York gave him a lifeline. He was hired to co-anchor Today in New York, a local morning show, alongside anchor Jane Hansen. It was a modest role, but Lauer attacked it with everything he had. He was dependable, professional, and viewers responded to him warmly. Within a year, he was promoted to co-anchor Live at 5, one of the station's coveted evening slots. For a period, he appeared on multiple NBC programs in a single day, a logistical feat that spoke to his endurance and adaptability. From 1992 to 1997, Lauer became NBC's utility player, the man the network could call on for anything. He filled in on Weekend Today, NBC News at sunrise, and even substituted for Tom Brokaw on NBC Nightly News. He covered everything from weather updates to breaking news to celebrity interviews. His Q rating, the industry measure of personality appeal and familiarity, rose steadily. Network executives noticed a man who never seemed rattled, never seemed unprepared, and always made viewers feel at ease. That trust culminated in January 1994, when Lauer was named a full-time news anchor for the Day Show, a role that would define the next 2 decades of his professional life. When Matt Lauer joined the Today Show as a news anchor in 1994, the program was in trouble. Good Morning America on ABC had been steadily eroding Today's dominance, and NBC needed a jolt. Lauer provided it. He was different from the stiff, formal news anchors who populated morning television at the time. He was approachable. He had humor. He could pivot from a serious story about international conflict to a light-hearted celebrity segment, without the transition feeling jarring. Viewers responded to him the way you respond to someone you genuinely like, with warmth and with loyalty. On January 6, 1997, Lauer was elevated to co-anchor, taking over the seat vacated by veteran anchor Brian Gumbel. The pressure was immense. Gumbel had been the defining voice of Today for over a decade, and there was significant skepticism about whether Lauer could fill that space. His first week as co-anchor produced the second highest ratings in the show's history up to that point. The skeptics were silenced. Lauer didn't just inherit the chair. He made it his own. His on-screen partnership with co-anchor Katie Couric became one of the most celebrated pairings in the history of morning television. Their chemistry was electric. Playful, natural, and tinged with genuine affection. Couric has spoken publicly about her admiration for Lauer in the years they worked together, describing a dynamic that felt less like a professional arrangement and more like an actual friendship. Viewers loved them together. Their easy rapport gave the show a warmth that felt authentic rather than manufactured, and it drove Today's ratings to extraordinary heights. Over the next 2 decades, Lauer covered some of the most consequential events in American and world history. He was on air during the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, helping anchor NBC's coverage as the nation tried to process an unthinkable tragedy. He reported from war zones, covered presidential elections, and sat across from heads of state and cultural giants. His interviews were serious when they needed to be and conversational when the moment called for lightness. He was, by any professional measure, one of the finest morning television anchors of his generation. In 1997, Lauer also became a contributing anchor for Dateline NBC, a role he held for 20 years. That position pushed him into long-form investigative journalism, a world very different from the morning show environment. He led prime-time documentary specials, covered criminal investigations, and reported on complex social issues. Most morning anchors never cross into that territory. Lauer did it consistently, expanding his reach and cementing his reputation as a journalist capable of much more than charm and small talk. By any external measure, his professional life was a remarkable success story. In July 1997, Lauer met Dutch model Annette Roque on a blind date. Roque, who worked under modeling named Jade, had built a successful career in Paris and New York, working with high-profile fashion brands. Their early courtship was tentative. Lauer later admitted the romantic connection took time to develop, with several weeks passing before they even kissed. But once they moved forward, they moved quickly. By October 1998, less than 18 months after they met, Matt Lauer and Annette Roque were married in a ceremony in Bridgehampton, New York. The marriage generated significant media attention, a pairing of one of America's most recognizable television personalities with European fashion model carried an obvious allure for tabloids and entertainment press. Together, they would have 3 children: a son, Jack Matthew, born in June 2001, a daughter, Romy, born in October 2003, and another son, Tejas, known as Ty, born in November 2006. On the surface, the family projected an image of successful, affluent domestic happiness. Hampton's estate, horseback riding competitions, school graduations, and what appeared to be a grounded life despite Lauer's enormous fame. But that image concealed serious dysfunction. In 2006, while pregnant with their 3rd child, Annette Roque filed for divorce. The legal filing included serious accusations against Lauer, allegations of emotional abuse, controlling behavior, extreme anger, and psychological cruelty. The characterization was jarring in its contrast to the warm, accessible persona Lauer projected on television. The divorce filing was eventually withdrawn after the couple entered counseling. They remained together publicly for another decade. But people close to them later acknowledged that the reconciliation was more a practical arrangement than a genuine repair, 2 people staying together for the sake of their children while living increasingly separate lives. The sequence of events that destroyed Matt Lauer's career began not in November 2017, when the world found out, but years earlier. According to accounts that emerged in the aftermath of his firing, and in subsequent investigative journalism, a pattern of serious misconduct had been occurring for much longer than anyone publicly acknowledged. The most serious allegation came from Brooke Nevels, a former NBC News producer who had worked as an assistant to anchor Meredith Vieira. Nevels alleged that Lauer sexually assaulted her in his hotel room during NBC's coverage of the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. In her account, first reported by journalist Ronan Farrow in his 2019 book Catch and Kill, Nevels described the encounter in graphic and disturbing terms, stating explicitly that she did not consent to what occurred. Lauer disputed her characterization, describing the encounter as consensual, but the details Nevels provided were specific, consistent, and deeply troubling, and they would form the core of the public reckoning that eventually came. The immediate trigger for Lauer's firing was a formal complaint filed with NBC in late November 2017. The complaint, according to NBC's own statement at the time, described behavior that violated the network's standards of conduct. What is remarkable and deeply telling about what followed is the speed with which NBC acted. On November 29, 2017, less than 24 hours after receiving the complaint, the network terminated Matt Lauer's employment. He had been with the Today Show for more than 20 years. His exit took less than a day. Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb, Lauer's co-anchors, learned his firing only minutes before they were required to go on air and announce it to the viewing public. The moment was extraordinary television, and not in any good sense. Both women were visibly shaken. Guthrie, who had worked alongside Lauer for years, was emotional as she delivered the news. The surreal nature of the moment, having to announce the abrupt dismissal of your colleague live on national television, without preparation, without time to process, was a striking image of how swiftly the situation had moved. Within 24 hours of Lauer's firing, multiple additional women came forward with their own accounts of harassment and misconduct. Their stories were not isolated incidents. They described a consistent pattern of behavior extending back years. Some women said they had attempted to report Lauer's conduct previously, but had been ignored or discouraged from pursuing complaints. The power dynamics at play were significant. Lauer was among the most valuable personalities NBC had, earning tens of millions of dollars a year, and the institutional incentive to protect him had been enormous. The investigation, published by Variety magazine, which had been in development for months and appeared on the same day as Lauer's firing, added explosive detail to the picture. The reporting, based on interviews with dozens of current and former NBC employees, described a workplace environment shaped by fear and silence. Among the most disturbing specific allegations, that Lauer had a hidden button installed beneath his desk that allowed him to lock his office door from the inside without physically rising from his chair. Several women described being summoned to his office, hearing the lock engage behind them, and experiencing harassment or assault. NBC acknowledged the existence of the button, but characterized it as a standard security feature. Women who had worked there described it differently. The Variety report also described Lauer giving female colleagues explicit gifts of a sexual nature, making repeated inappropriate comments and inquiries about employees' personal and sexual lives, and retaliating against women who did not respond to his advances. The pattern described was not one of isolated poor judgment. It was systematic, sustained, and protected by an institutional culture that prioritized ratings and revenue over the safety and dignity of employees. NBC's statement announcing the termination was unambiguous. The network said it believed the conduct described was not an isolated incident, and it terminated Lauer's contract for cause, meaning they were not obligated to pay him the remaining value of his contract, which had been reportedly worth approximately $20 million per year. He received no severance. The message was clear. NBC wanted to sever all ties completely and immediately. For roughly 2 years after his firing, Matt Lauer said almost nothing publicly. He retreated entirely from public life. He did not issue lengthy public statements. He did not appear on television to offer his account. He disappeared. Then, in October 2019, Ronan Farrow published Catch and Kill, a sweeping investigation into sexual misconduct, institutional cover-ups, and the powerful forces at work to protect men in positions of influence. Lauer featured prominently in the book. Farrow's reporting included Brooke Neville's detailed account of the alleged assault in Sochi, and also painted a picture of NBC as an institution that had been aware of Lauer's behavior for years and had consistently chosen to shield him from accountability. The book's publication reignited the story with enormous force. Neville's, who had remained anonymous in the initial reporting after Lauer's firing, was now named, and her account was presented in full. The allegations were no longer vague complaints. They were specific, documented, and supported by Farrow's extensive reporting. NBC pushed back on some of the book's characterizations of the network's culpability, but the broader narrative of a powerful man protected by powerful institutions resonated deeply in a cultural moment still processing the revelations that had come out of the Me Too movement. Lauer finally broke his silence in 2020 with a lengthy open letter published online. In it, he categorically denied that the encounter with Neville's was non-consensual, describing it as an extramarital affair that he characterized as wrong but not criminal. He accused Farrow of conducting sloppy journalism, alleging that important context and contradictory evidence had been ignored in service of a predetermined narrative. He acknowledged that he behaved badly in his marriage and in other aspects of his professional conduct, but he pushed back firmly against the most serious criminal characterizations. The letter was detailed and impassioned, but it did not significantly alter public perception. Farrow stood by his reporting. Neville's maintained her account. And for most observers, the broader pattern of behavior that had been documented by Variety, by NBC's own internal investigation, and by numerous women who spoke on record, was too well established to be meaningfully undermined by a single letter.